Okay, welcome back. So we are going to be doing a full tour. So I done a mini tour of the new V2 features, but I actually just added more yesterday. This is something that potentially is a downside with my personality. Maybe it's the ADHD, but if I find a glitch, like I don't want to just fix that glitch and then move forward. Like I want to add more features or do this or that. And then we also had GPT 5.1 launch, and every time a new major model launches, the IDE that I use, which is Windsurf, will do like promo pricing on that model. And so I had free tokens to use the GPT-5.1. So I was like, ooh, okay, like I want to get our series support live as well as like a couple other things. So we're just going to be going through the changelog here for V2 because V2, like the first V2 version, was not put out live because I was waiting until I did a full video, like showing how to use the parser, how to use all the bits and bobs. And then when I was doing that video, I found a little mini glitch that we needed to fix. So we haven't even put this out yet, but this is going to be coming out probably today or tomorrow as I'm filming this on Monday the 17th. So let's go through. One is blueprint parsing, which I'll explain further. We have an outline corkboard view now, which also does parsing. We have a context deck for chapters. We have chapter status marks, which I'll also be going over. We have word count for chapters only. So it used to be on these project cards, you can see there's a goal. So you can set a goal when you create a project, and it was counting all words in the project, which isn't super helpful if that is your word count goal for the book itself. So now it is only counting chapter files. So that is a little bit more on the nose with the goal words. And then we have, let's see, what else? We also have a couple little bug fixes. There were some issues with consistent generation logging, especially if there was some sort of issue with the model, it would not log properly. So we fixed that. Let's see what else. Oh, and when you refresh models, there was also a little glitch. If you come to settings and go to your AI settings, when you refresh the models, we had a little glitch where models that were removed were not clearing out of the list, but new models were being added. So that's now fixed. So if you refresh models, that's now been fixed. There's also an error code that should launch if you try to use a model that is no longer actually with OpenRouter or available. It should pop and say that there was an empty generation and that you should potentially try a different model. That used to fail silently, so now there should be a pop-up for you, both in the prompt doc, and then there's also a pop-up window that will come up to help you know that is what's going on. Let's see. We also have, you can also edit your project settings from inside the editor, as well as edit sequence and prompts from the docs inside the editor. So we'll go over that. You can now export sequences. That was something that I hadn't added when we added our sequences. So now you can export and import in your sequences. So that'll be really nice. And we have better prompt structures. So I'll actually go into my generation logs to show you. Let's see if I come further back. Let's try, okay, one of these should be the old setup. And yes, okay. So you'll see with the raw template, this is the raw template resolved prompt. This was what resolved means, is that this is the actual content instead of the variables that were up here. So this is the actual content. And it's all just thrown together. And then in the final messages sent to the provider, we had a system message, which is your project system prompt. And then we have the user prompt, which is the full resolved prompt is in the user. And so this is quite a long one. So if I come all the way down here, let's see, where does it start? This is the JSON payload. So this is actually what gets fully sent through, which is basically the less pretty version of above. It's just broken into the system role and then the user role, and it's all thrown into one big blob. And then you get your response. So what we adjusted is you will see the prompts are a little bit different. We have new defaults that you can use now that use the new setup. So I'll go over that in a second. But basically, we now have the raw template that looks the same. But you'll see at the top here, this is the context now. So if I come down here, resolved prompt, we still have all of that resolved. Looks good. And then if we come down, we come down here, you'll see something different. These are called XML tags. And so now the context area at the top of the prompts is context variables. And so here we have context, this is the start of the context, and then if we come further down, there will be an end of the context. So here we go. So this is the end of the context. And then here, this starts the task, and then this ends the task down here. So what that does is it helps the AI models differentiate between the different types of context. So if I close out here and we come into our prompts, I'll use one of these as an example. So now in the prompts, there used to just be one box here, and that was your full prompt box. Now there is a context box, and there is a task and instruction box. So you can have some quote unquote instructions, but basically this just gives context to the context. So using the seed idea in words before. So this is the context of the words before. And then that will wrap the actual words before in those XML tags, which look like this. And then it would be this, which would show the start. And then there would be this, which shows the end. And then all of the actual words before would be right here. So that's what this does now. And that gives the models more context to know what exactly it's being fed. So it knows that this is context. So everything in this box, which are all of your variables. And we did change this so that the context variables belong in the context box. You can put some labels to those, but all the tasks and instructions and basically the main prompt belongs in the task box. The only variable that will be allowed in the task and instructions box is an instruction box variable for additional task instructions if you're adding that. So all of these, except for this, all of these are context variables. They're pulling some form of context from your project into the prompt so that the AI model knows what it's doing. And by adding these XML tags, it knows the difference between a story Bible and chapters, and it knows the difference between a style guide and chapters, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives a lot more details to the AI, and it knows where things begin and end. So it sandwiches it in between. And it's just a cleaner way for the model to understand what you're sending it. This should improve the output quite a bit, and it should just make it a lot easier, especially as you get into kind of the weeds of doing series or doing really long books. The more context you have, the more possibility there is for confusion on the model side. So this should help a lot with that. And since we're in here, we'll go over something else that's really exciting that I've wanted for a very long time. So I have ADHD, which means that I get distracted really easily. And one of my big qualms, and one of the reasons that we have these other variables that are different than other software that uses variables similar to ours, is that I wanted to be able to know that if I'm working on blurbs or if I'm working on scene mining for TikTok, that I can put in this chapters variable and it will pull all of my chapters in that project into the prompt as context. And I don't have to worry about turning all of those on and then turning it off for doing something around the marketing or an email newsletter or whatever the case may be. Same for like Story Bible would actually be a good use case in some cases for doing book blurbs or marketing or like a newsletter. You wouldn't necessarily need the full prose. So things like that was really important to me so that I had a way of kind of safeguarding against my own issues with remembering to change what was turned on and what was turned off, what was toggled in the project when I was doing different prompts. And I task switch a fair amount, not like super strongly, but I do generate, and depending on the workflow that I'm using, I might be doing skeleton drafting with notes open, and then I would be doing a drafting round with the model, and then I'd be going through edits, both my own, and then potentially if I needed to regenerate certain passages or doing things like that. And then if I hit a wall with my creativity for the day, which can happen, I might switch to admin tasks. So when I switch tasks, it's very hard for me to be like, oh, what do I have turned on? What do I have turned off? Oh crap, I turned that off to test this new model, but then I didn't turn it back on, et cetera, et cetera. So now this will be a lot easier because you'll be able to say, okay, like I have certain world build stuff that's going to be on. So like the world build might always be on, the style, all the style files are going to always be on. Depending, it might have locations, or some of these others always turn on as like globals. And then I can also turn on past chapters too. So if I actually put this in, and this had my cursor in the wrong box, so I'm gonna Control Command X, and I'm gonna put this where it would belong, which would be in the context. So I would use this in a drafting prompt. I would have words before as the outline. Actually, I wouldn't now. That is the old way. So I would have either the AI chapter context, or I would have chapter outline, which we'll go into how that's different now, as the chapter outline. And then I would have past 2 chapters. So the great thing about past 2 chapters is if you are on chapter 1, you don't have to alter your prompt to remove the past chapters and then add it back in once you reach chapter 3. You don't have to do that. It will pull as many chapters as there are, it will pull as many chapters as there are available. And it pulls from the manuscript folder specifically, and it works. So you do want to make sure that your numbering is consistent on there. So if you do an alt chapter, I would put it in a different folder, and I might even change it away from the numerals, because right now it pulls from this type of setup or this type of setup for knowing what chapter numbers there are. So it will pull the last 2 in this case, but this is actually dynamic. So I can actually do 3, or I can do 5. And same thing, if I'm on chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, it will just go, okay, I'm on chapter 3, so only chapter 1 and chapter 2 are available. It will only add in those 2 chapters. But once you're on chapter 6, it will have the full past chapters of 5. So this number is changeable. There are only 2 variables that support this type of dynamic use. It's past chapters and past story Bible. So what I would have that be is I would do past chapters 2. Usually. I usually don't do more than 3, so I'd have past chapters 2. And then if I am really in the weeds, I might have past story Bible set to 10 or 5 even. And so then it will pull the past story Bible, but I don't have to have those full chapters turned on. So that's a really great use case for those. And it allows you to have drafting prompts that have those past chapters included, and you don't have to worry about turning those chapters on and off as you go through and draft your chapters, which again, for me with ADHD, that is a huge lifesaver, because especially when I'm like task switching, because like I could go from chapter 7, so it's pulling 5 and 6, and then maybe I'm doing edits, and so then I would go to chapter 20 and I'm needing chapter 18 and 19. And before, it's very possible 5 and 6 would still be turned on and I wouldn't notice. And then I'm using 5 and 6 as the past chapters, and chapter 20 is now like completely screwed up. So this can really help with that. Okay, so I think that's it for the new prompts. And again, we did update the default prompts. So what you would want to do is go through. So here, I'll cancel out of this. In the settings, there's the import default prompts and themes. We updated the prompts and we also updated the themes. So that includes the new themes, including this one, which is the Magical Xmas theme. And we also have the Spooky Christmas and Spooky Christmas Light. So those have been updated, as well as the prompts, which now have the new setup with the double boxes. I do feel like, I know it's a little bit of a pain if you've already set up any of your prompts, but I do feel like that this is a worthy update for what it can do for better output. So it is worth it, I promise. Okay. While we're in here too, if you go to manage categories, we used to have, if you edited any of the categories, there was like a long list of basically like rainbow colors. Now there is a full color picker. I just realized, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to run out of colors to use and differentiate really quickly. So now you have a color picker here, and that color picker, this is RGB values. If you click, this is hue, saturation, and lightness. And then if you go again, this is the hex code. So you can insert a direct hex code if you have one. And we'll just cancel out of that. And we'll close. Okay, and we already covered that you can import and export sequences now. That was an oversight when we added sequences. That has now been fixed. So we should be good there. Oh, the other thing is when you export prompts, it now saves not only the category, but it also saves the color of the category. So the default colors are now going to be set for you. Instead, it was always just like one blue color. So that's also been updated. Okay, I think that's all. Oh, actually, really quickly, there is something in themes that changed. There were primary light and dark that was being set in the background and wasn't being set in the theme. So you can now control those. They're not used in a lot of places, I will say, because the primary light was often not overly usable. So I would switch it for a different color, but they are used in a couple different areas. Those you can change here. Same with button hovers. And then chapter status colors. So chapter status was another one that I really wanted for my purposes. I also think it'll be really helpful as we head into having collaboration features where you can have your editor have an editor account where they won't have access to the AI generation. They will have access to your entire project. This will be really helpful for them where there will be colors, which we'll see as we go into the project. These are the colors that you can set. Obviously, because we have themes, I wanted these to also be changeable because not like having set colors for those would not work in all themes. So here you can change that yourself to have whatever you want there. And then I think that's it. So we added this and we added the hovers and the primaries. And we'll close out of this. We'll go back to project. And here you will see these dot colors. That means not started because that's the color we already chose. And if you look here, this is new. This is the chapter context deck. And so if I click into this, it says one of 3 sections available. So there are 3 total sections that can be in the chapter context deck. That is chapter outline, AI context packet, and the story Bible. And we'll actually, let's open up. I think this one has yes. So this has 3 sections of 3 sections available. If I open it up, that's chapter outline. Here's the AI context packet, which is just sample text. And then there's a story Bible entry. What happens now? Really quickly, we'll go into, so these are our blueprints. If we come into outline, this is our outline. This is using Markdown, same with the blueprints. This is using Markdown to be able to parse information intelligently from one file to another. So what this means is if I have my chapters with this double hash, scenes with triple hash, if I come into this up here, changes it to the corkboard. So this is the grid corkboard, and we have a list corkboard. And then you can expand all or collapse all, and that just shows the scenes. You can add labels for beats. For instance, this might be a meet cute. You could add that label there. You can delete scenes. You can also reorder scenes. There is an auto number, which will allow the title to be irrelevant to the order that they're occurring in. Obviously, you would want to change that to not confuse. If you are using the dynamic variables, you would want to, once you have finalized like the order, you would go in and you would change those titles, and you would do so just by switching back to the regular document view. And this will then be in that order. So if chapter 1 ends up being chapter 3, it'll be the 3rd chapter in the outline here. And then you would just change that to say chapter 3 instead of chapter 1 at that point. So we have this and we can reorder. Same thing with the scenes. You'd want to reorder those as scene 1. It would be scene chapter 3, scene 1, etc., etc. And we can move chapters, or we can move scenes from one chapter to another chapter. All of that is doable. And what happens is when we go finalize outline, it will have a couple different options. One, it will say update titles to match outline. So when you create a project, you can set how many chapters you want. So right now I'm suggesting just have a couple chapters in there so that you have the manuscript folder already created, and you start having your structure set up. And so you would have pre-labeled chapters. So if I come back in here, this says chapter 1, chapter 2. So that is the default setting for that. So when I come here and again come into Corkboard, finalize, that says change update titles to match outline. So in this case, the outline says chapter 1, the flea market discovery. So that would change from the current. So you can update or you can choose not to. You can choose to keep the defaults if you would like. Then it also has additional document options. You can create an AI context folder and per chapter documents that will be labeled as such. You can also create story Bibles folder and per chapter documents labeled as such. So in this case, we've already done that. So you'll see there's an AI context folder that has the same number of chapters as our manuscript folder. And same thing with story Bibles. And what happens is if I wanted to create a context packet for chapter 1, I would come in here. Obviously, this would be empty at that point. And then I would have basically the blueprints folders all on. So I would, if this were toggled off, I would toggle all of this on. I'd have my characters, I'd have my world building, my outline, my location, my ideas. There would also be a style folder in here that would have all of my style guides for global as well as for per chapter. Same thing with characters, would have a arc file as well as a global file. So the global file has basically just your basic physical characteristics, and then your arc would actually have the internal stuff that's going on with the character, and the outline would be turned on, and I would say I need chapter 1 context packet. It would go through all the blueprint and pull just relevant information for chapter 1 into this AI context packet. This is all relevant info for chapter 1. And then what happens if I come back to chapter 1 and I look at my chapter context? So this comes from the outline file directly. So this shows me exactly what my chapter outline is. And if we weren't doing AI context packet, I can just use this. And if we remember, I come here to new and I look at my variable helpers, there is an AI chapter context packet. So this would pull the chapter context for the chapter I am currently in. So this would pull the chapter context that we just put into chapter 1 AIC. And there's chapter content, which if I put here, and here I'll just do this as a test. Oh, actually, outline. Okay. And you do have to have a description. Use this outline to draft. This is a horrible prompt. Don't use that as a prompt. That would be really silly. Okay, so we create prompt. I come to test, and I'm on classic view. So classic view allows me to preview the prompt before I run it. This is the raw. If I go to resolved, this will show. Oh, hold on. Edit. That says chapter content. That's not what I wanted. I don't want chapter content. I want chapter outline. There we go. All right. Update. And if I go back and then I come back and here we go. I had chapter content, and that is going to do the actual content of the chapter, which you could use for doing edits if you wanted to do it that way. But anyway, I put the wrong variable, which would be, so this is the chapter outline. This shows the chapter outline here. And then if you look down here, it says use this outline to draft. If you go to the final, it will actually show you the little XML tag. So it shows this is context, this is the chapter outline, this is what they're feeding you as the chapter outline, and this is your task as the AI. And what this does, and the reason that we did this, is so that you can have a full context packet or you can have a chapter outline and you can see it in the chapter. Obviously, I can see it right here. Another way of doing this would be I could have this open, so I could have my outline open in the side one if I wanted to see it in a larger view. Same thing with the context packet. I could open my context packet over here in split view, but I have it right here. And what's better about that is that I can use this as a variable, and that chapter outline variable is based on the chapter I'm inside of. So it is not going to use the chapter 1 outline in chapter 2. It's going to use the chapter 2 outline in chapter 2, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I can have one drafting prompt that pulls the chapter outline or pulls the AI context packet, and then I can have it draft. And what's beautiful about that is I don't have to worry about removing my drafting prompt or my outline from this file. So before we had this, what I would do is I'd have words before as my chapter outline, and then I would draft, and then I would then have to take that outline and I'd put it into an outline document. And it was just a lot of copying, pasting, and copying, pasting, copying, pasting. And it's really annoying. And we obviously don't want prompts in our finished prose for the chapter. That's what can get you in trouble, especially if you don't want people knowing you use AI or how you use AI. And so this makes it so that this is completely clean. This is just my prose. And when I go to export, none of the chapter context deck is exported with that export. What is exported is just prose in the main chapter file. None of the other is exported. So that just makes for a really clean workflow. And also there's no copying and pasting because that outline is going to create. So if I have 20 chapters here, when I go to finalize, It is going to create all 20 chapters. It is going to name it. If I have a name, it's going to name it accordingly. And you can click into here to change that. So if I did just change this to chapter 3, I could change that there. It's going to create all 20 chapters. It's going to pull in the outlines for those chapters. It's going to pull in the chapter summary as well as the scene summaries all into there. If I chose it, it's also going to create my AI context folder, which you can click off if you don't want to use that. If you're not planning on using it, you can just turn it off and just not do that. And then it's going to create my story Bibles. And this is going to allow me to have all the files I need very cleanly laid out so that there isn't a mess here, because I can just close these folders and now I've just got my manuscript here. The same thing is going to happen with the blueprint. So let's talk about that a little bit. So if I come down to blueprint, this is also going to be marked down. So you'll see here we have style. So the one hashtag, this is the folder name, as well as it is telling the system what file type this is going to be. So this is telling the system that the folder is going to be called style, and the file type is also going to be style. So don't change those on things like style, because that you want those to be consistent. And it's going to have the genre style. It's going to have author voice right there. And then here we've got characters. So this is going to be a character file type. That's also going to be the name of the folder. Here are my characters. My characters are double hash instead of single hash. And that's going to create a single file for each of those characters. As it did here, this is actually doubled up because I did it twice. And then world building, same thing. This is going to be the folder, and this is also the file type. It is going to then create one file called Magic System, and it's going to put that in there. The outline is a little bit different just because the outline is going into a single file. So the outline, the double hash indicates chapters, triple hash indicates scenes. The entire outline is going to go into one file because that's being parsed separately. And then we come down, we have also location. This is a file type, and then these are the location files. So those are going to be in separate files. We have ideas. This would be an idea type. This will be the folder, and it'll be an idea file type, and then this would be a file for the ideas. Now, if I come down here and I do a single hash, and I'm trying to think of something that I might need in my blueprints for a specific use. You know what? Maybe you're doing nonfiction or something along those lines, or maybe you're just doing research for fiction. So I might have research. So there is not a research file type, but I can have a research folder, and I can have double hash. And this is actually something that we're working on. These should not auto to a header. So that's what that just tried to do. So this tried to do that. If you just backspace once, the hashes come back. And then we would come to, and it didn't do that on research. So that's something to note with a bug fix that I'm working on. So this would be the file type of boat. Okay. And then that would be, and then I would come here, boat information. So this will be a folder type, and then notes. This will be a note file type for anything that is, if a file type is not associated with the name of the single hash, then these will be note file types. And here, this is the blueprint parser. So I'll say the blueprint is ready for parsing. It found 18 sections, process, continue to preview. It will now show you, it's going to create 7 folders. It's going to create a style folder, a characters folder, a world building, an outline, a location, an ideas, and research. And if any of these folders already exist, it won't create new folders. It will just put those into the folders. There'll be 9 files created. There will be 2 style, and this will show you that this is a style file type. That's file 1, this is file 2. It'll create 2 characters. This is file 1, file 2. Same here. It will create 1 outline because that's how the outlines are set up. It'll create a location. It's going to create an idea. And then this says note. This is because it's going to create 1 note because research is not a file type. So it will create a boats file that is a note type. And you can create 9 documents. It will go through and it will create all of those documents with the content inside. So if you come here, this shows that this is the character content. You have your magic system. You have your outline, which if we switch to document, that's your outline. We have ideas as a folder, and here is the idea. So this is a really fast, seamless way to be able to do all of your brainstorming essentially in one document. And I'm going to be doing a full video on how to do the blueprinting, how to do all of your file setup, including your outline, and how to parse it so that you can start drafting. I'll be doing a full video about that because essentially I use a modified snowflake method, and the majority of that snowflake method would happen in one blueprint file. And you can do the outlining in that same blueprint file. But honestly, I found it's easier to just use your blueprint file as an active document and then generate your actual outline in an outline file directly. So you don't need to parse it. You can if you want to. That's an option for you. And that also depends on whether you want an outline file for your outline or not, or if you can just are fine with your outline winging it on its own. You could also set it up with having that folder and then finishing the outline once that setup is created. It's up to you. And then how to do those in 2 separate parts or in 1 full part. So we'll be going through that. And basically, I do all my brainstorming in 1 blueprint. The prompts that I have set up are set up to generate in this format, where it will have a certain set of headers. As I go through the process, it will create those headers for me so that basically it's already clean and ready to go. And then I just remove the prompts that I'm adding in order to ask questions and all of that stuff. I'm just going through and cleaning it. So what I would usually do is I do all my brainstorming. I would come here, the 3 dots, scroll down. I would hit duplicate so that I would then clean the second file so that I have my OG file untouched, and then I would clean the second one, and then I would parse the second one. So that we'll be going through in the next video. And then right here, you will see this has a little link icon right next to it. You'll also see that I cannot click into this. I can select and copy, but I cannot edit this file. And if you look up here, it now says read only, linked from another project. This is our series support. I'm going to back out to library. And you're going to see right here that this says trial. So that's actually a series title. And then it says book 1.5, book 2. So these are in the same series, which means I can link files from my book 1 or 1.5 to my book 2. So if I come in here, this is my book 1. Also here, really quickly, this is your edit project details. You can now do that from here. So you can change your AI system prompt from here. You can change your cover image. And now you will also see that there is a series. So there's a dropdown for existing series, or you can just type in a new file type or a new series. Sorry, not file type. Series here. And that would create a new series, and then you can number it. It does support full series as well as partial. And then if we just switch back here. Okay. And so we'll just save changes. And so right here, I have all of my files. So if I were working on my sequel, I might want the sequels file, which was alternative ideas that were happening in the brainstorm file. So I already did with this. So I'm going to come here. Oh, I think I did it with this one too. Let's just ideas. And here are ideas for book 2. Click out, it will save. And I go to the 3-dot menu and share to series. It now says, oh, hey, there's another project in the series. Do you want to share it to that? I do. So this is helpful also, obviously, if you're working on a very large series, you might have multiple target projects that you need to do this. There are 2 options for you to share to series. One is you link, and the link means that in the new file, as you saw, that is a linked copy. So you cannot edit it in the other project. All you can do is see it, and all you can do is use it as a context, as a toggle for an active document. Or you can copy it. So depending on what you're working on, I could see both use cases, which is why they're both here. You might want linked if you really have it ironclad, or you could copy it as things change and as you add things, and you might not want that added to the first book in the series. Maybe you don't, you have the option. So link means that you will only be able to edit that file in its original project, which would be your book 1. If you do a copy, it copies it over once. They are not synced. So if you make changes in book 2, it will not change anything in book 1. And it does that copy once, and then that is essentially a file for the new project. So if we do link, we share, and we come back out to library, and we come to other, we scroll down, we now have ideas 1. This is linked. Here we are. Now, because this was linked, and I didn't do a copy, if I go to right the 3 dots, I can also see now it says duplicate as a local copy. If I do that, I can now edit this one. So that now is an editable file. and that allows me to make changes to this file. Okay. So that is the series support. So it does have support with sharing files between different books in the series now. Okay. And I think, let's see what else. So sequences, that was the other thing. If you open up a sequence, if you hit this edit, you can now edit the sequence directly from the editor. If you do this little arrow, it shows you what those prompts actually are. So you can actually see what the prompts are. If you want to edit one of those prompts, you can't do that in sequence. So we're going to close out a sequence. We're going to come to prompts. We're going to go to 9-step, which is what was being used. I'm in classic view. That's important. Quick mode is one click and she's off to the races. So we want classic mode. And then I can come here and hit the little pencil icon, and then I can edit that prompt from here. And then you can, of course, create new prompts right there. All right, so that covers that. And we already went over the project settings can now be edited inside the editor. Okay, I think that covers all of our very exciting new changes. So the next video is going to be showing how to actually use all of the excitement around the blueprint parsing, the outline parsing, and then how to use that in actually drafting chapters. So we'll be doing a little mini series on that next. And then, so I'm going to be doing a fast go through on that. I'm not going to go into a real time. If you are interested in seeing a real time book being created with the decisions that I would actively be making at each step, please make a comment and I can do that for you guys. It is going to be a little bit more time consuming. Those are longer videos, longer to edit. So I just want to make sure that anybody really wants that versus just seeing I would use these prompts, I would use it in this sequence, and this is what that would look like versus this is how I actually make decisions for different things. So let me know if you'd like to see that, and I will see you in the next one.